I believe our stories are powerful. So you are doing some amazing things and you are doing them in, I'm doing air quotes, midlife or after. I don't know what we define midlife as now. So, how did you end up being involved in really trying to make a difference for women in the realm of sports and being so active and so, great at some of these things you're doing?
Oh, thanks. I will try to give the 360 overview. So I've been an athlete all of my life. I was a softball player up until college, and then I took a hiatus and started cycling a little bit on the East Coast. And when I moved to Portland, I started cycling a lot. And then at a certain point, a few years prior to my 50th birthday, my activity level waned and I wasn't really doing too much. And then I realized I have to reinvigorate, change my life, get active again because it was such a big part of my life. So it was a kind of a transformational time for me when I turned 50. So I turned a few months after turning 50, I joined a gym. The person who was my personal trainer was a triathlete. And I found myself saying to him, I've always wanted to do triathlons. Don't know where it came from. Swear
Hmm.
I don't know where that came from. So he started me doing personal training every week with a focus on training for a short distance race a few months later. I fell in love with the sport. Um, it brought such joy and community, and it really got my endorphins going. And I was just so high on life when that started. And then I continued doing triathlons, and I realized when I turned, it's so funny. It coincides with me learning to surf, like buying a surfboard. And when I started surfing at 57, I realized that the surf industry, as well as the triathlon industry and the active world as in a whole, doesn't adequately represent women of our age group.
Yeah.
So that's really was the impetus for me to start focusing on gathering women, forming a community, focusing on women 50 and over, getting active, reinvigorating themselves in whatever sport or activity they want. And first, it started off focusing on triathlon and surfing. And then I realized it doesn't really matter what it is, it's just being active. And my definition of active is different than someone else. So my focus is a little bit more on the higher energy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So but just seeing us not adequately represented really, um, yeah, in hindsight, really lit a fire under me. And I realized that
Mhm.
I'm doing this. I'm around a community of badass women that are doing this, and we are not seeing each other in marketing, in models, in activewear company promotions. And I said, Oof, I really want to get us together and start forming a community of being active women and then seeing where it goes.
It's really kind of cool. And actually, I cannot claim to be anywhere near as fit or as into any particular sport as you are. However, I do play some golf. My husband loves it, and so I'm taking it up and I'm, trudging along, kind of trying to figure it out. And I noticed this in golf too. First of all, there's not that many women who play. Of course, we're a small percentage.
Hmm.
Not of course, but we are a small percentage. But then, second of all, as you were talking, I was thinking, when have I seen the average person who's a woman playing golf? Well, usually they're still younger. It's the same kind of thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're here to change that. I mean, there's so much happening in the sports world right now, the past few years, and there's this impetus, and I think that it's. I saw a T-shirt, Celine Yeager, who was nominated to the Gravel Cycling Hall of Fame recently. She had a shirt on that said, "It's not a moment, it's a movement." And that
Mm.
just really encapsulates everything. It's not just a moment in time. It's such a movement forward that we're unstoppable, right? And so folks who and society who has placed us in an irrelevancy and being invisible and not useful really have to step up and recognize, otherwise we'll go elsewhere to buy their products or be in support. So, yeah, well, I'm
Yeah.
glad that you started golf because it's just being outside is awesome if you're able.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, and that's honestly part of the reason I like it and have talked on the podcast before about being outside. Being outside is such a big deal. So let's kind of go from there because we know, or listeners, maybe you don't know, but you can listen to a couple of episodes that I'll point you to in the show notes. We know the benefits of getting off our butts and doing some exercise. But I think we want to talk about it again and talk about the benefits of really maybe taking it a step further, actually taking up a sport. And you're doing triathlons, you're doing surfing, I'm doing golf, although again, not at the level you're doing. But tell us a bit more about the physical benefits of taking it a bit further like that.
Okay. Okay, so I could talk. Well, I'll speak personally. So I learned, I was told when I started triathlons from my personal trainer that I'm an endorphin junkie. So for me, the benefits from a physical perspective is I I feel better. My bones and joints feel better. More, it's not really just such a physical thing. It's mental. It's like
Mm,
psychological and mental. And when I'm super active, I realize that everything else around me is so much more calm. Much more. It's much calmer. I have
huh.
less stress in my life, and it's for the benefits of being physically active are multidimensional for me. And also, when I've run into folks who I have a few people in mind where they've had an injury and or they've had children and then they get back and doing some physical activity, they realize how much they've missed it because they had it in their life before.
Mm.
And it changes their perspective, and it also helps to make them a little bit more calm. And the world feels a little less stressful.
I love that. Oh my goodness. And that's really
Yeah.
the key to half the things that I'm always talking to people about because stress is so rough on our bodies. So, as you were saying that, I was thinking, I feel like maybe people have barriers in their own minds that would prevent them from, say, trying to train for a triathlon, even a sprint one.
Hmm.
And maybe it's I'm just sorry, I'm stumbling over my words, but I'm so fascinated that you said your joints feel better because I'm imagining that the story we might tell ourselves in the 40s, 50s, 60s is that maybe we might hurt ourselves or maybe it might be bad for our joints. And so that kind of amazed me that you feel like yours it's better for you to be super active.
Yeah, it is. And I also want to do a clarifier as well. So I'm postmenopausal, and um, with the hormone changes, I found the past 2 years that an old injury kind of rears its head if I'm not taking. And I don't want to be a promoter of supplements. I don't want to be a promoter of HRT, but I'm only sharing what's working for me. So
Mm-hmm.
I take some supplements for my osteoporosis. It's genetic in my family, and when I take that coupled with
Mm.
exercise and functional movement and strength training, it allows me to feel better, and then therefore it allows me to do my triathlon training and then do racing.
Smart.
So yeah, when I don't exercise, it helps lessen some of the inflammation, but then psychologically, it's like it's a total imbalance. And then if I ensure that I'm moving, it makes whatever injuries I have feel better. And coupled that with my supplements and my mental stability, everything then becomes, is it homeostasis or homeostatic? It's more calm,
Balanced.
balanced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And can you dig into a little bit more? I feel like there had to be some bravery in there somewhere when you first decided you were going to do the triathlon or you first decided you were going to surf. Do you know where that came from or kind of how you kind of took that first leap?
I'm really competitive with myself. I've always been competitive. And so in all and complete transparency. So I had a life event when I turned 50, and I just wasn't exercising, and I had to really take a really deep, long look at myself. And I think I've written about it at one point, but I really didn't like what I saw. And that making that first step into that gym was the best thing that I ever did, because I think something. kicked off in my brain, whatever active side of the brain it is, and said, okay, this is where you're most comfortable with. This is where you belong. Because I didn't have that
Mm,
feeling. So,
yeah.
yeah, so that life event really kicked it off. And yeah, and I'm super competitive, competitive with myself. And when I got started doing triathlons, it was all in. I never missed a workout. I was loving the community. I loved how I felt. And I also liked that schedule because you're on
Hmm.
a schedule.
Hmm.
So that all of that coupled together with then the high from racing kept me going.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because you chose some things where you can compete with yourself. It's
Hmm.
not necessarily a team type of thing. And then I could see that if that's something you enjoy doing, it would keep you going for sure.
Yeah, definitely kept me
Yeah.
motivated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and being in the in the community of other triathletes, especially with the women, I don't no, I did have it in my cycling community when I first moved to Portland, but the community is very supportive. And I was really yearning for that and didn't know. So, coupled with everything that I just said and having that community and then being able to cycle with friends who may not be triathletes and then swimming with folks, it just, it's just that sense of community and camaraderie and support that you get from doing something active like this is what drives
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, and I think we probably need to add that in because when we're talking about the physical benefits, we're bringing in mental, of course, too.
Mhm.
And then I know this is a big thing for you is that you've created a whole group and business out of this with that community aspect. So maybe that's a piece of advice to those of us who might say, you know what, I'm going to take up running or something, and we just always do it by ourselves. Maybe that's not the best and most fun way to do it, right?
Yeah, I struggle with that. Because I'm a loner and an introvert at times, and it's so funny that I'm thinking about this now. I'm a loner. I was always doing things alone, but then I loved the community, but I was so competitive with myself that um, I didn't think I was good enough and I was going to hold people back. So then I wanted to exercise and train alone. But excuse me, that didn't get me anywhere. And then when I worked out and trained with others, it brings that energy and helps to support you and then you get better because of that support that you have. Whatever that better looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, let's stay on this for a second because there was a summer, gosh, it could be 12 or 13 years ago now. I'm trying to think, how old were my kids and all that. At least 10 years ago. There was a summer when a friend of mine who is a big runner talked me into doing a train for a half marathon program. And it started in May and it went until Labor Day weekend. And I actually could not attend the half marathon on Labor Day weekend, but I was like, sure, I'll go. And I I hate running and never was a runner ever, not ever. And I don't have the greatest knees either. But I found not my friend who was already faster than me, but I found three other women in that group who I'd never met before. And as I'm thinking back on this, I used to look forward to going and, I mean, we were basically jogging, but going and running with them. And we stayed friends for a long time, even though after that summer, I didn't really keep up with the running. Maybe I didn't because I started doing it by myself. I don't know.
You always have that opportunity to try it again. Yeah, that story you hear all the time. Um, yeah, it's amazing what we tell ourselves and how that helps us and how that it hurts us. Where I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, especially when you have a community of athletes that have varying levels of being advanced or slow or fast. And rather than comparing myself or comparing yourself to someone else, you find that niche, you find those folks who are similar, and it helps push you and helps you get better, but it also doesn't wreak havoc on your mental state. And I'm part of a triathlon group where the level of athleticism is off the charts, as well as folks that are um, have been doing triathlons for years, but that are slower, and then they're middle range, and then they're like world champions, right? And so that always lends to folks like me who compare myself to others to feel I'm not fast enough, I'm not good enough, I don't want to go train with them. And then I realize we're all part of a community and they're all supportive. And if someone goes ahead, someone goes ahead. And that's something that I have to tell myself every single day. And I forget to sometimes. So it's a little bit of a struggle.
Well, and I think that's going to be a common thing because one of the questions I was going to ask you is what if someone is thinking, like, how could I start now? There's no way I'm good enough. I can't imagine. And this is what you're kind of talking about. And the other thing I wonder is when you're doing a sport like this, are we really paying attention to other people anyway? They're not probably paying that much attention to you, right?
Mm-mm.
So we get all in our heads about it, but we don't need to.
Exactly.